Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? It is day 22, RPG a Day, 2017, August 22nd. I'm actually cutting this on the 21st, so the partial solar eclipse is happening here in Connecticut. We're nowhere near totality, so it's not all that impressive. I did take a look, and it's cool, but anyhow, it's awesome, but not quite as awesome as if I was right in the path of totality. But this video is not about awesome stellar phenomena. It's about something a lot more mundane. So our question, which RPGs are the easiest for you to run? And so it would be really easy for me to give you a really flippant answer and say, well, of course, it's Lamentations of the Flame Princess and all OSR D&D clones. I can do that in my sleep, which I can. Or at least you can wake me out of a dead sleep and I can run the game. And, that's the case because I've done it a lot. Those games are just kind of a part of my psyche or makeup now. I understand what to do. The mechanics aren't all that complicated. There's a few different mechanics. I know when to call for a mechanic. So I started thinking about that, though. There's other games that I'm becoming more familiar with, and any game that I develop some kind of mastery over, then it's going to be somewhat easy to run, and perhaps just as easy to run in the long term. And it's my goal, whatever game I look at, if the game starts doing it for me, my goal is to develop some kind of system mastery. My goal really is to kind of be able to run the game, and run the game without looking at the book. Even, maybe I want to be a player, but even so, if the game is really doing it for me, I want to know that game. I want to know that game inside out and out, know how it works, and be able to run it. I want to be able to own the game. And that's just kind of how I'm built. I mean, I guess I've been game mastering since I started playing. And it's just part of me. Not that I prefer one over the other. It's just I love to play just as much as I like to game master. Sometimes more, depending on the day. Anyhow, this isn't about my psyche, is it either? Is it? Well, let's see. But developing that kind of system mastery is really my goal. There's other games I look at and I'm like, yeah, they're not really doing it for me, but these, you guys are playing? Okay, yeah, I'd like to play with you guys, sure. I'll play it, but I ain't running that bad boy. And I don't necessarily want to develop system mastery over that particular game. But if a game's doing it for me, then I want to do that. So, what these games or RPGs are the easiest for me to run? Well, maybe I could say, well, it's the ones that are simple, the ones that are rules light. Those are definitely easier to learn, right? Well, maybe. It depends on, what the mechanic's actually doing. Now, certainly it's easier to teach and easier to run a game that has this really simple core mechanic, and maybe it's just a straight D100 roll all the time, and you're just doing, let's pretend it's just pass-fail, whatever it is, and there's no other nuances in this imaginary D100 game that I'm proposing, which I'm sure there's plenty of games that use that. Or a 2D6 roll, some kind of pass-fail. Or like something like Fudge or Fate, where you're just rolling these 4 dice, and you'll know, like, did I hit this number, target number, or not? Then did I hit this ability? Did I make this opposed roll or not make this opposed roll? Really, really easy. You're using the same core mechanic over and over again. Even something like a D20 game, and when I say D20, I mean like the actual D20 system, not like old school D&D games that use a D20 die a lot. I mean, honest to God, this is the D20 system. They use the D20 for just about everything, And that's really easy to teach and to learn too. Part of what makes those games, or a game like, let's just take D20 as an example. I'm not, saying it's a great thing. It's not a bad thing, but one of the things that makes something like D20 so easy to run is because it's very easy to figure out when to apply modifiers and how to apply modifiers. Because there's a little 5% increments up and down the line. It works the same the entire stretch of that D20 roll, just like a D100 roll would. Take something like a bell curve, and it behaves a little bit differently. I recall looking for the first time at those and doing like a real big analysis. I believe was when I was looking at some 2D6 and 3D6 rolls, and later on, a lot later on, actually looking at Fudge. A year ago, I actually took a look at Fudge and saw what would modifiers do to this. I looked at the alternate method of using like a D6 minus D6 in Fudge, because if you look at Fate or Fudge dice, going off on this little tangent, really what you're dealing with is 4D3, and if you want to get technical, it's 4D3 minus 8 in terms of the results. So a D6 minus D6 really kind of mimics that, really close bell curve, really close to the same thing. One of the things, though, that you have to remember when you're using something like that really small dice pool, is that modifiers are enormously powerful. And so it's one thing to just kind of intuitively know how to add a +2 or a +3 or -4, here, rolling a D20, or plus or minus 10 or 15 or 5% on a D100 roll. +1, +2, +3, really, really powerful in these tiny dice pools. And so having that intuitive grasp of like, when should I apply this? I'm looking at like Powered by the Apocalypse. I'm looking at Fate recently, and that's been a lot of fun checking those games out. But you have to kind of, it's part of looking at those games is that you have to realize like any kind of modifiers that get inserted in there, they're enormously powerful. They are a totally different animal than what you might be used to if you're used to using percentage-based games or D20. So in some ways that makes them less easy to run. Because part of running a game, to me, part of like really developing system mastery is figuring out when to use situational modifiers, or really like how to use situational modifiers. Is it slippery? Are we trying to track somebody in the dark? Am I trying to fight on the enemy's terrain? All that kind of good stuff. Does this guy have the home advantage in some way? Situational modifiers. Sometimes, there's mechanics that just really don't take situational modifiers really, really well because they're so powerful. That's, why, anyhow, I won't go off on that tangent about like what dice mechanics I prefer for what, but that's a consideration. And, the other thing to consider too, as far as modifiers are concerned, is in dice pools. And I'm not anti-dice pools. It's just a matter of like what's easier or not easier is realizing like what those modifiers do at the ends of that bell curve. Looking at even looking at something like the advantage disadvantage mechanic in 5th edition Dungeons and Dragons. Right in the dead center, you apply a modifier. It's very, very powerful. On the ends, not so much. Same thing for something like Ubiquity. You apply the modifier in the middle of the competence range. It's has an effect, but on the ends, not as much. And that's just something to keep in mind. So, that being said, I find Ubiquity very easy to run. I'm really, wrapping my head around like when to put this modifier in place and that modifier in place. There's a few things I'm not sure about, and I have to look in the book. But then again, honestly, if I'm running Lamentations of the Flame Princess, if it comes down to like, well, how fast does this boat go? I don't know. I gotta look that up in the book because I'm not going to commit that to memory. That's insane. So, there's that part of it. But really, honestly, at the end of the day, it's the games that are the easiest for me to run are the ones that I can intuitively understand. I can understand when to, call for a mechanic roll, how to apply situational modifiers, all that kind of good stuff. Actually, this, I probably should have said this earlier, but what the heck? I didn't want to make the video this long. The other thing that's a learning curve for me, and perhaps will become easier for me over time, looking at games like Tech Noir, like Powered by the Apocalypse, like Fate, where you're not using numbers so much. I mean, everything translates to numbers in the end, but you're using a lot of words, and things are a little bit fuzzier, and you're talking about like when do you invoke an aspect, and what exactly does this aspect pertain to in a situation where you're running Tech Noir, and it's all about applying adjectives to people, and what verb are you using, or Powered by the Apocalypse, where it's a little more like what's this GM move, what's going to trigger this GM move, what's the difference between this hard success and this soft success and all that kind of stuff, and how do you apply those things. That gets tricky. That is something that over time I believe I'll develop system mastery over, and it won't be an issue. However, right now it's a little bit fuzzier for me. Is that going to be something that's going to make it one of the easiest games for me to run in the future? I'm not really sure. I think the other thing, and then I'll try to end this video and not ramble on forever, is one of the things that makes a game easy to run is it easy to teach? Is it easy to teach somebody, in a relatively short period of time? Teaching the new guy, how much time, was it really take to really kind of explain the mechanics, get them up and running, and when they really still don't know everything, allow them to play. That's part of it too. So yeah, it's a more complicated topic than it appears on the surface, isn't it? Or at least to me it was. So what do you think about all this? Is it just your favorite game is easiest for you to run, or is there more to it?